Come and sew with me the Capri summer dress. Now this pattern has a gathered 3-tier skirt and tie up bow shoulders. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the skirt, and this is the shortest tier piece. So I'm going to put them together right sides facing and sew down the side seams with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Then you can finish the edges, so if you have an overlocker you can overlock that raw edge, or if you don't you can either use pinking shears like I have here, or you can sew a very small zigzag stitch. Then I'm going to actually finish the edges of the hem of that skirt, so I'm going to take it back over to my overlocker and I'm going to overlock that edge whilst also pushing that seam allowance towards the back. Once you've overlocked the edge you can bring it back to the sewing machine and stitch that with a 1 centimetre seam allowance on the wrong side of the fabric. If you don't actually have an overlocker, you can do a double turned hem, which is where you turn up the hem and press it down 0.5 centimetres with the iron, and then you turn it up again and stitch on top of that. In this example, I'm going to show you how to add lace or embroidery anglaise onto your skirt. So this is some embroidery anglaise that I actually got second hand on Vinted, and I'm just going to be stitching that underneath that hem that we've just created, trying to make sure that I keep the pattern piece even all the way around. And this is what it should look like once it's finished. Then you can take that over to the iron and give that all a really good press, and also making sure to press that seam allowance towards the back of the skirt. Now you can go and repeat the exact steps that we've just done for the other 2 tiers. Once all the skirt tiers are done, it should look something like this, whether you've added lace or not, obviously that depends. So I'm just going to be pinning them all down with the longest layer at the bottom. I'm going to pin down the side seams on both sides, and I'm also going to pin around the waist seam, and then I'm going to stitch it all with a very small tacking stitch of 0.5 centimetres from the edge all the way around. Once you've completed this, you can go ahead and finish the edges of that back skirt seam. So you can either overlock it, use your pinking shears, or you can run a small zigzag stitch. Next we're going to create the gathers for the skirt. So to do this you want a really long stitch length, so either 4 or 5, and we're going to start with one section of the skirt. So this is the right back side, and I'm going to back stitch at the side seam, and then I'm going to run some stitches close to the edge, and then I'm going to leave the threads loose at the end. This step is really important. You want to leave long thread tails at one end. Then go back and create the exact same thing directly next to those stitches as close as you can without crossing over. I'm also going to leave those thread tails long on this row of stitches as well. And then you should be able to gather just like this. Repeat the same thing for the other 2 skirt sections, and then just leave it all to one side. We're going to gather it properly later. Let's make the tie straps next. So let's take one pair and place them together right sides facing. Then we're going to pin all the way round and then take it back over to the sewing machine and stitch them this time with a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around. Take your time once you get to the end of the tie in manoeuvring, because you've got quite a sharp angle to turn your sewing machine foot. Once it's all been stitched, we're just going to mitre the corners, which is cutting off any excess near a point, so when you turn it the right way around you get a really sharp point. So I'm just going to cut off any excess at that top longest point, and I'm also going to cut a bit of a right angle on the side of the tie, and that way we're going to get a really nice point when we turn it inside out. When it comes to turning it inside out, I like to firstly push it through with my finger just like this, and then once it gets to a point where I can't reach it anymore, I like to use the end of a pencil to push that edge through. Now take that tie back over to the iron and give it a really good steam press. this next step is optional, but I do like to go back and just top stitch very close to the edge, the tie. That way it keeps its shape when it's made into a bow. Repeat the steps for the other 3 ties and then place them to one side and bring over your centre front bodice and your mid front bodice. And we're going to pin them together right sides facing, matching the notches. I'm not going to quite pin the top because this is sewn in a curved shape, so it's better to manoeuvre it once it's on the machine. But just look for those double notches and match those. They're going to help you if you've not labelled which piece is which, or you've not kept the paper on the pattern. Follow the notches and they're going to help you line up all the bodice pieces. So we're going to sew those together with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Just really take your time with this one because this is the trickiest piece to sew because you've got quite a curved shape for the bust point. Backstitch once you get to the end and then lift up your piece and just check that everything has stitched smooth when you've been sewing that bodice piece. Then carry on sewing in the same way the rest of the bodice pieces, matching those notches as you go. Then you're also going to repeat the same thing on the lining. And this is what it should look like. So I've taken my main and lining, I've done my lining in a different fabric to help show you, and I'm taking them back over to the sewing table. I'm giving all those seams a really good press, so I want them all to lay as flat as possible. You can ignore this next step if you don't want to use any lace, but in this example I wanted to add a lace trim around the neckline. So I'm going to start the lace about 2 to 3 centimetres away from that back seam because I don't want the zip to be caught up in the lace. And also because my embroidery on glaze is quite thick, I'm just going to fold it over just like this so that when I turn it up the right way it starts at a nice angle rather than a sharp line. I'm also going to pin those seams flat. It's going to be a little bit trickier when you get to the sweetheart neckline, if that's the neckline you've decided to do, because you're going to have to create a small pleat to go around the curve. So I'm making just a little box pleat here, so when I turn it up the right way the fabric folds into itself just like this. Create a tacking stitch just 0.5 centimetre away from the edge. Now it's time to add on the straps. So I'm just going to be making sure that my longest edge of the tie, so the bit that points downwards, is facing away from the middle of the bodice. And then I'm going to pin that longest edge against the second seam. So the seam that joins the side front bodice to the mid front bodice. I'm going to show you here in a picture. And then I'm also going to do the same at the back. So I want that point to face away from the centre back seam so that it mirrors the other tie. And I'm going to pin that so the longest side is against the middle back seam, so the seam that joins the mid back to the side back. And it should look like this. Then I'm just going to tack that with a 0.5 centimetre seam allowance. Repeat this for the other side of the bodice, so the other 2 straps, and then lay everything out on a flat surface just like this. Now I'm going to take back the lining and I'm going to place the main fabric and the lining right sides together, and I'm going to pin them together, matching those seams and edges as I go along. I'm also going to pin everything down and try and keep those seams open and as flat as possible. Then it's time to stitch around that neckline with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around. Once you're done, just lift everything up and just check that your straps align, that they mirror on either side, and that if you have added any lace, that it hasn't got caught up in with your straps or in with the seam. If you've decided to do a sweetheart neckline, then just turn it back to the wrong side, and I'm just going to snip 3 notches, 3 quite deep notches into that middle centre front where the sweetheart points down to, just so once you turn it the right way around, you've got a nice sharp point. Now I'm going to understitch, which means I'm going to push all of that seam allowance that we've just sewn towards the back, which in my case is the white fabric, and I'm going to stitch very close to the edge. So this is with the right side of the fabric facing up. I'm going to stitch maybe 1/2 centimetre away from the edge all the way through, and as you're doing this, just make sure to feel underneath the fabric and make sure that seam allowance is all pushed towards the back. This is going to help stop it rolling once the dress is finished. Now take your bodice back over to the ironing board, and just on the lining only, you're going to turn up the hem of that bodice by 1 centimetre. Iron that all the way around, but if you would prefer to use an overlocker, you can just overlock that edge. Now I'm going to move on to attaching the skirt to the bodice. So I'm going to lay my bodice out flat with the right sides facing, and then I'm going to use those double stitches that we did to gather the skirt. Now to work out how much to gather the skirt, I'm going to firstly pin down the side seams of the bodice against the side seams of the skirt. So work out your side seam of the bodice. It should be 3 lines in, just where I'm pointing with my finger, 3 seams in. And I'm going to keep those seam allowance flat, and I'm going to pin that against the side seam of the skirt on both sides. After you've done that, you can then use those double stitches to gather the skirt to the exact measurement that you need. And I'm also going to be using that notch that we made for the centre front bodice and the centre front skirt to line those up so you know the exact middle of the skirt. Try and get the gathers as even as you can all the way around. Once you're done and everything's pinned down, take that over to the sewing machine and stitch with the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Now, because we've done a double row of stitching, the gathers should be really easy to move. So if you need to, you can move them as you're sewing and also flatten everything out with your fingers. Afterwards, turn it the right way and just check that nothing's got caught up in the fabric. If it has, just unpick that section and do it again. Now it's time to insert the zip, so I'm going to start off with placing my dress in the machine so that the back zip seam is facing inwards towards the machine, and then I'm going to position the zip on top so that the teeth of the zip are facing the opposite way, so I want them to be facing inwards towards the dress. I'm going to pin that about 1.5 centimetres away from the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to pin also to make sure that my waist seam is pointing upwards. I'm going to sew all the way down to where the double notch in the skirt finishes. And to do this, I'm going to use my left zip foot. And if you're on a domestic machine, you'll have a foot that has 2 squares at the bottom, so you want to use the left side. Once you get down to the bottom of the zip, you're going to back stitch, and then you're going to do up the zip all the way. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to mark on our zip by very small snips where those seams are in the zip, because we want them to line up on the other side. So when I mean seams, I mean the waist seam, and I also mean the hem, and in my case also the bottom of the embroidery onglays of that first tier. So if I snip with scissors, I can make sure that the zip lines exactly up on the other side. So when you do up the zip, you've got a perfect matching dress back. So to get the zip in the right position to sew on the other side, I'm going to undo it again, Then I'm going to lay it flat, and then I'm going to rotate it in an anti-clockwise direction. And this is exactly how it should be pinned on the other side. And when I'm pinning on the other side, I'm going to firstly line up those notches. So I'm lining up that notch we made into the zip with the waist seam. Then I'm going to do the exact same for the hem of the first tier of the skirt. Then I'm going to stitch that down with the other side of the zip foot. And then once I'm done, I'm going to do up the zip before I go any further and just check that those seams line up. Once you're done, you're going to now attach the lining to the zip. So I'm firstly going to make sure that I've got that press turned up edge that we did before on the lining, or you may have an overlocked edge. And I'm going to make sure, if it's a turned up edge, that it sits about 0.5 centimetre below the waist seam. If it's an overlock edge, you want it to sit 1.5 centimetres below the waist seam. Then I'm going to pin that all the way up, and then I'm going to go and use my zip foot and stitch that as close to the zip sleeve as I can. Once you're done, repeat for the other side of the zip. Then I'm just going to turn it the right way round and just check that I've got a nice even point at the top of my zip. Now we're going to move on to attaching together the back centre back seam. I'm going to be pinning this together from the bottom upwards, and I'm just going to make sure any decoration that I've got, like lace or embroidery on glaze, matches on either side, and any of the hems of the tier match on both sides. So I'm going to pin just above where that second tier finishes, and then I'm going to take it over to the machine and stitch right sides together with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance with the normal foot. Once you've got just past the second tier, I'm going to switch to a zip foot, and I'm going to be using the zip foot that's the right foot. So we want the needle to be on the right side of the machine, and I'm going to be stitching up to just past where those stitches finishes on the bottom of the zip, where those double notches are, as close to the zip as possible without catching it. Turn the dress the right way round and just check that you're happy with how the zip finishes. And if everything is clean and perfectly positioned, then we're going to move on to attaching the lining to the waist seam. So with the inside of the fabric facing you, I'm just going to pin all the way around the hem of the lining that we just turned up, about 0.5 centimetres below the waist seam. If you're using an overlocked edge, you want to make sure it finishes about 1.5 centimetres below that seam. Then starting about 2 centimetres away from the zip, I'm going to stitch in the ditch on the right side of the fabric, which this means I'm going to try and stitch into that waist seam. And then this is what it should look like once you're finished on the inside of the fabric. And then your dress is all done. These are my finished results for my samples, and I would love for you to share your creations with me at Serena Atelier UK on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll be very grateful if you could leave me a review on Etsy. Thank you so much.